us Daly, who currently serves as the Northeast Regional Organizer for the Wisconsin Public Education Network. Also joining us is Lori Blakeslee, the Director of School and Community Relations for the Green Bay Public School District. Lori is also a past president of WISPRA, the Wisconsin Schools Public Relations Association. Denise and Lori will be presenting a series of slides, and following their presentation, we'll answer questions from our audience members. Thank you in advance to our audience for keeping all questions and responses respectful. Please join me now in welcoming Denise and Lori.
Okay, we can see there's a challenge here. It happens to me every place I go. Podiums are always about right up here, and I'm about right down here. So I'm going to actually take the mic and move, and so that I can see everybody and communicate with you all. So we're very happy to be here tonight. This is an important topic that needs to be presented and understood by communities all over the state of Wisconsin. And that is tax bill transparency. I'm going to put a real strong comment out here first, and you're probably going to hear me say it a few times tonight. And that is, this is not about where people choose to send their children. We have statewide school choice in Wisconsin. People can choose to send their children wherever they want to. What we're saying is that you, the taxpayers in the state of Wisconsin, deserve to know where your tax dollars are going. So that when a school district says we have to go to referenda because we need to be able to meet our bills, and you go, well, I have property tax bills and I'm giving money to public schools. Well, what the clarification in all of this is that all of those tax dollars are not going to your public schools. And so we're going to do an explanation tonight of what's happening. And Lori's here to talk about what one of the school districts in the state of Wisconsin is already doing. And then we're going to talk about what you can do in your community to move this forward, if you choose to. So, taxpayers have a right to know. You have a right to know where your tax dollars are going and how they're being used. And public schools have to convey to you yearly in their budget cycle where your tax dollars are being spent. And so that's really important for you to understand and to know. And Lori, if you'll go to the next one. This is Lori. I'm Denise. Hair's a little bit longer and a lot curlier. And I work for Wisconsin Public Education Network. And it's a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that is committed to ensuring that every child, no matter their zip code, has access to a high-quality public school. And we're working really hard to do that. And do you know why we're having to do this? The next slide, Lori. Is because our Constitution, Article 10, and Article 3, excuse me, Article 10, Section 3 of our Constitution says, and you can read it up there, but I'll just take a moment to read it. The legislature shall provide by law for the establishment of district schools which shall be as nearly in the general fund, in the state budget. And we're going to put it into the education fund. The education fund is a set amount of money that has to serve all public and all education in the state of Wisconsin. And so when they said they were going to move the cost of vouchers, and this is in 2015, from the general fund to the education fund, that was a move of $15 million. And so $15 million was now going to come out right away out of the education fund to cover the cost of vouchers. So from there, some legislators said, you know, we don't think this should be this way, but if it is going to be this way, we need to tell taxpayers. So they drafted legislation that said, on our tax bill, we're going to put on there, the cost of vouchers. And that could have been done in 2016, and it wasn't. The legislation didn't even get a hearing, and it has been proposed each year since 2016, and it still hasn't gotten a hearing, which would be a very easy move because all the Department of Revenue would have to do is say, okay, this line is going to be added to every single tax bill in the state of Wisconsin. But we couldn't get it passed. So we said, Wisconsin Public Education Network said, we need to do something to inform taxpayers so they understand why these costs are going up and what's going on. So we started building this campaign and this idea, and we talked about it, put a plan together, and said, you know what, we're going to go school district by school district. And so that's what we've started to do. And it's called the Go Public Transparency Project. And Lori represents one of the schools that they are the first school in the state that actually put it on the tax bill. And there are 9 municipalities in the Green Bay Area Public School District. And we got it on the tax bill in the city of Green Bay to start with, and now we have one of the other municipalities, and we're closing in on the rest of them. But since that time, Eau Claire has moved on it, Washburn, Ashland, Superior, and 53 other school districts. So we're moving forward with this, and we want to see this happen because we think taxpayers deserve to know where their dollars are going. Next slide, Larry. So this is just to kind of give you a little explanation of what happened in this last budget, the 25-27 budget. For the first time in the history of the state of Wisconsin, the state legislature chose to give a $0 increase to public schools. Now, there's kind of a misnomer sometimes that public schools have the ability to raise money in their school district, and they don't. So it's either taxpayer dollars or it's state of Wisconsin dollars. And they have to balance their budget every single year. And they have to do a presentation to you in an annual meeting that shows you that budget and what happened in that budget. And that's an important clarification. But we really wanted the state legislature to close the special education gap. That was a huge thing for us. The federal government is supposed to provide a certain number of dollars for special ed because special ed is a federally regulated service in schools. It's run by the states, it's run by the school districts, but it's a federal program. Because a lot of people have what we call individual IEPs, individual education plans. And those are guidelines that it's guidelined by the federal government, but also by the state government. And so that's really important information. The state of Wisconsin is become pretty low in their reimbursement for special ed. And it's really a challenge because it's dollars that have to be spent. And Lori can tell you, but I'm going to take away a piece of her presentation and say, the Green Bay Area Public School District general fund to put into their special ed fund to make up for the differences in the reimbursements that they're not getting from the federal government and from the state of Wisconsin. $36 million. And that's just one school district having to do with special ed. I know James and I talked about what it is for Fort Edwards and other school districts around the state, and it's pretty significant. We were hoping they would get to 42, which they put in the budget, but they didn't meet it, and 45 this next year percent reimbursement, but that didn't happen because there's this getting nerdy and in the weeds here, sorry about that for a minute. There's a thing called some sufficient and some certain. Some sufficient means it's a sufficient enough amount of money to pay the bills and meet the obligations. And then there's some certain, which means that there's a certain amount of money, and when it's gone, and you may not get the money you need to cover the services that you have to provide. Public schools are under a some certain guideline. Private schools for special ed are under a some sufficient guideline. So they get a 90% reimbursement for special ed, and it's a some sufficient. Public schools are at 42 and 45, but it's probably going to come in, from what we can hear from the state budget office, it's probably going to come in at about 38% reimbursement. So that's why you have school districts having to take money out of their general fund because they have to pay special ed costs at first dollar. So those funds, those services have to be provided. And it's a bad situation because it pits, in some school districts, general ed against special ed, and every child in every public school in the state of Wisconsin deserves to be educated. And that's what's critical to remember here, and an important clarification. So, they didn't meet their requirement, or what we wanted them to do. Second was equitable, adequate, transparent, predictable, spendable, and fair state funding. And we wanted them to increase the revenue limit because every school district in the state is capped at how much money they can spend per child. And so, James, 11,625 here? Yeah, that's all they can spend per child. And if they go over that, if they get revenues over that amount, that money has to go back to property tax owners. So you get a tax credit back if they go over that amount, because that's all they can spend per child. So we really wanted to see those revenue limits be lifted, because the way that the funding for schools, public schools, was set up is that in 1993, 94, that time period, during Tommy Thompson's governor time, they asked all school districts to take a snapshot of how they were spending money at that time. And that was then how they were set up to go forward on how much money they could spend. And so if you were a really fiscally conservative school district, which Green Bay was, and obviously Fort Edwards was, then you were at a lower amount. There were school districts, public school districts in the state of Wisconsin who were higher spending districts at that time, so now they are at a higher amount. Gibraltar School District, which is up in Door County, spends about $23,000 per child. $11,650, $11,650, $23,000. Big differences in what you can deliver as a product to public schools. And that's why we want this, we want the state of Wisconsin to meet their constitutional requirement of equitable and equal schools. The next thing was to align priority spending to priority needs. The state of Wisconsin is number 48 in reimbursement for English language learners. and yet we have communities that have a high number of families that speak a different language. And we need to make sure they are getting the education that they deserve in our schools. So we asked for an increase in reimbursement for that. We also asked for supports in the mental health supports. Right now you have to apply for grants and do that in a grant. We wanted to see more robust mental health supports because kids coming out of COVID had some significant needs that were identified. We also asked for student hunger in rural schools and low revenue districts and early childhood. I know many of you have heard conversations about what's happening with our early childhood programs and our child care centers, and we have some real significant deserts of child care for early child care, and that we need to change that and get that fixed. And so, then we wanted accountability for all public dollars and a moratorium on private voucher and independent charter spending until we get public education paid for like it's constitutionally required to do so. We wanted to see some of those changes. Next. Oh, and over on the other side here, this is from Baird, which is a big financial company all over the state, and you can see the increase from 2015 to 2025 and the number of school districts that are spending more than 10% is coming from referendums of their budgets are having to come from referendums. So that's an important thing for you to get to know about. So this is a tracking of the Wisconsin Voucher Program. This is per pupil payments from 2013-14 to what it is in 26-27. And this is from the Wisconsin Association of School Business Officials, and not provided by either one of us, but a very qualified resource. And you can see in 2013-14, a private school voucher was $6,442. And it's just continued to increase that to 2025-26, it's $13,371. Per student. And what did we say that you have here in Port Edwards? $11,650. So, and then it's going to continue to go up and some of those, we have three different things, so you can see it's K-8 is the dark blue, 9 through 12 vouchers are the middle blue, and then the very light blue is the special needs scholarship program. And those are three of the different vouchers that are available to people and that are out there. So, Lori, next slide. We have spent 17 years in public education without a cost of living increase. This means consumer CPI, we haven't kept up with CPI for over 17 years. If we would have, each one of our school districts, each child in every single public school district would have an additional $3,573 per child. And you can think about your home and 17 years in your home, and what have your costs changed? How have they gone up? How have you gotten raises in your jobs? How have you gotten, gas prices haven't stopped going up. Utility prices haven't stopped going up. The cost of buses in our schools haven't stopped going up. The need for new computers and equipment haven't stopped going up. But our school districts are being asked to be at a very low level of spending and have not even gotten a cost of living increase. Next one. And that's from the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, which is a nonpartisan, state-run bureau that does all the finances for the financial figuring. So remember how I said in 2015 at the state school convention, they said that the cost of vouchers was going from the general fund to the school fund, and that it was $15 million statewide. These Next one. So we've made 75 presentations, and over 50 school districts in the state are taking on this project. And this is those last 3 slides are why we felt it was so critical to tell taxpayers that what the cost of privatization is, but more importantly, to say to you taxpayers, these are where your dollars are going. It's all for information purposes. We're not telling you that any kind of school is better than the other. We're just telling you that this is what it's costing you, and that you should be aware of that, so that you understand why your public school is having to come to you and ask for money. So next slide. So we put this plan together, and we talked to school districts around the state, and one school district, which was my home school district, stepped up and said, yes, we're interested in doing this. So I'm going to turn it over to Lori, and she's going to tell you about their journey in this process.
Thanks for having us tonight. I'm going to add something. I'm not sure if Denise said it. I didn't use this thing before I didn't hear her say it. I think one of the things that's important to understand is that when they decided that they were paying that original $15 million the first year that they had the statewide voucher program, because there's multiple voucher programs in the state, right? Racine has one, Milwaukee has one, Kenosha has one. They had tried to get one for Green Bay. We were in Green Bay very successful. I was not there, and Denise really helped lead the charge. And so we all placed in the statewide voucher program instead of having our own voucher program, which has been beneficial to us because we fall under the same rules that the rest of the school districts in the state do, except for the other urbans. And but when they made that change, then what they decided was rather than having the state fund that pot of money, what they would do is each school district that gets a bill from the state for what the voucher program costs. And then it's up to the school board to decide, are they going to charge the taxpayers for that, to pay for that voucher bill, or are they going to eat that cost, right? And when school districts have really tight budgets, they can't eat the cost of vouchers, right? So they are in the position of having to levy and tax their local taxpayers to cover the bill for vouchers. Does that make sense? So that's why this conversation becomes important, because that change in 2015 of state dollars going to a state pot to pay for vouchers, then changed to each school district would now get a bill for the students in their district that chose to take a voucher, and now the school district would have to pay that bill, and actually what happens is the state just withholds it from our state aid. And so if we did not levy for them, as Denise mentioned, like this last year, the district would have had an additional $15 million hole to fill on top of our already $34 million deficit. So we had no choice but to go to taxpayers and say, we're going to have to levy you for this additional $15 million. So our journey started back in 2020. We actually did one in 2017, and then COVID happened. I think we forgot, we wrote a resolution and we did another one. And in 2023, it became really a big issue because we just saw such a large increase in the amount for the voucher payments. And so it just felt like, just like as a district, we have to put the state mandates that what our increases are for taxes for referendums. So right at the bottom of your tax bill, because that's what it looks like in our municipality, it will say Green Bay has an operational referendum, and out of the total taxes you pay in Green Bay Public Schools, this much is what you're paying this year for their operational referendum, and we have a facilities referendum, and this is how much you're paying towards that facilities referendum. And so our thought was, well, it would be nice if there was a line on there that also said, here, this is what you're paying for the voucher bill, for the voucher taxes, so that it was clear, right? So that these are additional taxes you're paying and where are they going. So we did a resolution, and again, it was, we saw these big increases in the voucher payments. We were unsuccessful the first time we took it to City Council. And actually, even though I'm here tonight, I'm really here in place of our She was president at the time, and really the school board really was the one who led this effort. So this was again really where our frustration came in. We were working really hard to come to our taxpayers and say, hey, we really need this referendum to pass. These are needs in our district. Look at us, we're bringing our mill rate down and still asking for additional money. But at the same time, we're seeing this more taxes we're having to come to take from our taxpayers to pay for the ever-increasing voucher bill. So that's really kind of stemmed to our frustration and why we thought this was important. And then the second piece is that I think as we kept talking about this voucher levy and how much it's costing, people got this perception that all these kids were leaving our district. And in fact, if you look at the red line there, that's the number of total students and the cap. So what that is, up until this year, there was a 1% cap each year on the voucher program. You can see we're far underneath the cap of number of students who could actually go to the voucher program. So really, it's the yellow line of the dollars that were being spent. So you can see the dollar amounts far higher, right, in proportion to the number of students actually taking a voucher. So again, it's trying to offset that myth of we had all these students leaving the district to take a voucher, and that's why the cost was so high. When really, the program continues to get more and more expensive every year. So, let's see. So basically then, how did we finally get to where it got passed by the city council? It was not an easy process. It meant a lot of conversations with alderpersons, because ultimately it was, the first place we took it was to the city of Green Bay, because the mayor was in support of this concept. But not all the alderpersons were. And so it was a lot of conversation. We were really fortunate. We ran an ambassador academy in our district, which allows us, which is we bring in community members to learn about the district every month for 9 months. They come to a session, learn a different aspect of the district. We happen to have one of our young council members who was a part of that. She listened to our financial presentation, felt very frustrated at this process, and so she became a real advocate to get it on the tax bill. We did a lot of communication through our district newsletter about, this is our budget, here's what's going on for vouchers. We had a lot of community advocates that participated, so Denise was part of a group of champions for Green Bay Public Schools. The League of Women Voters, our Democratic legislators got really involved. So when they finally did come to the council meeting, again, not without some difficulty, there were a lot of committee meetings that were held first that our board members attended to explain to committees why we were doing this, why we were making this ask. At the actual council meeting, and there's a link in the presentation. You can actually watch the meeting, so if you're kind of interested to see what that could look like. Because there were a couple of council members who were just like, we really don't understand why it needs to be in the tax bill. Don't you send a newsletter home to people? Like, isn't that sufficient? When they showed up to testify, the school board members, Denise testified, we had people from our Catholic school system come and testify against the change. We had the person, former state legislator who led the statewide voucher charge, came and testified against adding this. We're really trying to make it, kind of making that accusation that this is really because Green Bay Public Schools doesn't like vouchers, right? So they don't want this, so that's why they want to put it on the tax bill. And we were very, very clear in our messaging. We stayed very much on point. This is not about the choices people make. This is not about what our feelings are about the voucher program. This is simply a request to be transparent, so that as we keep coming out for referendums and asking people to, make a decision to vote for a referendum and tax themselves, basically, that they also understand that we're also because everything that's on that tax bill isn't currently coming to Green Bay Public Schools. So what it ended up is we did not get what we wanted exactly, which is it does not align under the referendum. It's actually in a place probably a lot of people don't look, which is under the notes section, but that was what legally was determined, and Denise can talk a little bit more about that process, about where they could put it. So it's in the notes section, talks about here's how much the city of Green Bay residents, so remember we have multiple municipalities, so we have to break out our 7 million, so for the city of Green Bay, they pay about 9+ million that goes towards the voucher program. And so we have some wording on there that tells people that, and then Denise, if you want to switch the slide. So I think the more important part is, so then we made sure to really communicate about the change. So we did media, we put stuff in our newsletter, because we wanted people to know it was there. We highlighted our podcast, we gave messages to our clerical, because we were kind of concerned that there might be some people who would start calling about it, and actually it was kind of crickets. So all of our great preparation really resulted in having very little feedback on it. The school board members said that really all they heard was positive. We really, I expected we would hear some calls at the office. We didn't see that, didn't see negative emails. And really what's been interesting about the process is that we've been dealing with, as most districts have been dealing with, these very difficult budget conversations and having to make further cuts. What's been fascinating is to see, as people are chatting about this on social media, there's a new recognition that people are paying for vouchers and they didn't really realize it before. And so I would say it's done what we hoped it's done would do, which is just create greater awareness.
So I hope that was informative for you, and what's really cool in all of this is that everything we learned with Green Bay, and doing this first, was, oh that's right, I'm sorry. Everything we learned about Green Bay first is now been put into our toolbox. And we have a big toolkit that's available to every single school district in the state that wants to do this and wants to move through this and make this happen. In fact, that's the QR code, and that's the site. Lori, will you hit on that privatization site? Hopefully it'll go there. No? Okay. This takes you to our website, and Lori, if you scroll down to the red bar down here, and go to that red bar. If you go to that red bar on your computers at home, you can find out the cost of privatization in every single school district in the state of Wisconsin, the 421 school districts. So we can put in Port Washington in the search, Port Edwards in the search bar up there, and it'll pull up Port Edwards and what the cost is to this school district. And it'll change every year as the other changes happen. We can do it for Wisconsin Rapids, we can do it for Marshfield, we can do it for any other school district in Wood County. And so it's just a nice tool. So you can exit out of that word. It will take us back to And this isn't just for private school vouchers, it's also for independent charters. And so there are two types of charters in the state of Wisconsin. There's independent charters, which have no real oversight or regulation, and then there are instrumentality charters, and those are the ones that are run by your public school district that have to have certified staff, that have to have curriculum approved, that have to have all of that kind of stuff. So that there's also a cost for that across the state right now as well. Sorry everybody, I messed everybody up here. Wisconsin Rapids were to say, we're doing this, and we're gonna put it, and then the others will kind of fall into place, because more than likely, they're smaller communities. And so those municipalities have a quick return system, so they can oftentimes view it at one moment, you know, like read it and read the resolution, and then they can vote on it at the next meeting. Mm-hmm.
I voted yes for a referendum for the school district, but that money is going down.
Referendum dollars will go to this school district. But if, James, did you levy in the last, did you guys levy up for your 620, for the 325? Is that part of your referendum? Okay, so some of that, Lori, can you answer that for me more effectively? If she voted yes for the referendum, and it was an operating referendum, yeah, and would her her vote yes, would that go to the school district? Yes.
So they can't, they can't say raise. I think I know the point.
Sure. So when you do an operational referendum, you are giving the district permission to tax higher than the revenue limit. So if your revenue limit is so in Green Bay, I'll make it simple, I'll talk about me because that's easier. So in Green Bay, we currently have a $16.5 million revenue limit. So even though our operational referendum, so our revenue limit is $11,650, but then there's additional money now. There's an additional $16.5 million that we get. So ours is closer to like 12,000 something per pupil is what we are every year because of that. But that's what you did.
The vouchers are only going to be at the 11,000.
No, so the voucher amount is whatever the state has decided the voucher amount is. So originally it started at a pretty small amount, and if you recall, one of the original arguments around putting in vouchers was that it would cost less than public education, right? And now what we're seeing is really vouchers are, in some cases, they're more than what a district is able to get with the revenue limit. So, yeah, but does that make sense? So what you did was you voted to authorize your district to tax you more than what the state says they're allowed to get. And just to be clear, that is a tool that the government created for school districts. So in 1893, when they put the revenue limits in place and said, we're going to freeze you at this amount, and then they increased it so much every once in a while, they increased the revenue limits, and then there was a per pupil student fee that came on each year. But then they said, we're going to give you some tools, and one is an operating referendum, which that's money to actually operate your school district, pay your staff, and then a facilities referendum. And that's really important to understand the difference, because when you do a facilities referendum, none of that money can be used to operate your school. So you can't feed your staff with that. So I'm sure from a taxpayer, it gets very frustrating, right? Because first the district comes and says, well, we need to fix the roof, and we need to fix the parking lot, and we need to do this, and we need you to give us some money for that. So you say, okay, yes, I'll help you out, that makes sense. And then 2 years later, or maybe that same year, they come back and say, well, now we need to pay the teachers and keep this program, and health insurance went up really high, and like, I just need money, right? But they sit in two separate pots. So there's the pot of money that can't be touched for anything but what the ballot said. So if it said it was to place a roof, put a parking lot in, add an addition, that is all that money can be spent on. And then the operating money is the money that actually is, you get additional taxes for to allow them to actually fund the school district.
How does that money follow students? Does it go to the students? Or does it go to that student school?
Are you talking about the voucher money?
Yeah.
Okay,
So 1,000 per
yeah,
child.
her question is, how does the money follow the child? And also, there's another misnomer out there that, like Lori said, that kids are leaving the public schools left and right. We have research that shows that the number of of children in private schools have never been students in public schools. But they just now chose to take a voucher because it's available to them. And it's available to that private school. So what happens is a child applies for a voucher, and there are requirements. It's a certain percentage of poverty, it's a certain number of kids per community, per school district, across the state. You know, there's requirements. So the child gets a voucher, chooses what school they're going to, and that money is then paid to that school district. If that child says, by the end of October, this isn't the right place for me, it's just not the right place, and that child leaves that school and chooses another school, maybe Wisconsin Rapids Public School, Port Edwards Public School, some other school, that money for that semester stays with that private school and doesn't go with the child.
Do they apply every year?
No. You apply once, and if your status changes, for example, say you're a stay-at-home mom, single parent, things like that, you're at a certain level, poverty level, things like that, you qualify for a voucher. That child has a voucher for their full-time in that school. And say the next year, you know, have a fabulous new job because your kids are all in school, you're making a great salary, income, your children still get a voucher.
Okay.
No further clarification.
One year and go back to public school the next year? Would it stop then?
Yeah, well, her question was, if you go to the private school for 1 year and come back, or come to the public school the next year, then it stops, yes.
For the note on the taxpayer, like the taxes when you get your tax bill, with that, does it say, let's say 16 million out of $20 million of the taxpayer money was spent in private schools? Or how does that read exactly? Or is it a percent saying 20% of money is being put into the private sector?
Here's what's cool about what has happened, is that what we learned in Green Bay, and we had legislators in the state legislature help us with going to the Department of Revenue, and so the Department of Revenue came back and said, here's the language that we will accept. If you follow this guideline of language, you may do this. And so, but what we found, for example, Eau Claire School District took it to their city council. Their city council wrote their own resolution of what they wanted it to say. And then it got approved through the Department of Revenue, and then they put that's what they're putting, and they're actually going to do an insert this first year, because they saw that was going to be easier for them to get done and get accomplished. And that's what it's going to be. It's really an important step, is working with your clerk's offices and things like that. Your school district sends to your city or municipality the amount to put on your tax bill of what public education is costing per taxpayer. So you live in Rudolph, right? Okay, I was going to say Randolph again, but Rudolph. It'll say on her tax bill how much goes to public education for the Wisconsin Rapids School District. Now, if I lived in the city of Wisconsin Rapids, it might say something different because, you know, for example, I'll use myself as an example. I live in the Green Bay Area Public School District. If you're in the city of Green Bay, it was $9.8 million, up to the amount that the school district is allowed to levy. The cost for private school vouchers is boom. And that's what the language that the Department of Revenue said that we could do. And so I live in the town of Scott, which is out by UWGB. And my 3,800 taxpayers in the town of Scott are
are paying $441,000 for vouchers. It's 625. I know. Don't tell my husband, okay? But so anyway, it's a lot of money, and you don't know that until you see that written on these tax bills, and that's why it's so important. But to clarify your question, yes. And some school districts and town councils are choosing to say, and this is a percent increase of. So you, as long as the Department of Revenue will approve what you want to put on there, then that's what we're saying to people that they can put on. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how you get started with this and how you can make it happen and how it all works. And that is, you really have to understand your tax bill and what kind of room you have on your tax bill, because that's going to decide how this can be done in your community. And so you also want to know how much vouchers and independent charters are costing your school district. And your business office in your school district can tell you that. And so that's an important, because the business office of the school district provides that information to the town clerks, to all of the different clerks, the municipal clerks. And then those municipal clerks put that on how it needs to look in the tax bill, and then whoever prints those tax bills prints that information. Make sure you know who is controlling tax bills in your different counties. For example, Wood County. Do all your tax bills go through Wood County? You know, then how is that done and how is that run? And you can find that from how your vouchers are already put on, or I mean, there's schools, your referendums and all that, how it's already put on the tax bill. Okay? And then you want to know all your townships and municipalities. Some school districts have 16 municipalities, but it moves fast through the little municipalities once the biggest municipality says yes to this. And then, who are your supporters in the community and in local government? Because as Lori explained in Green Bay, we need the mayor. The mayor was the tiebreaker in the vote for it to pass in Green Bay. And there were also some, I would say, some misconceptions by some of the city council members in Green Bay that this was going to be something that it wasn't. Because remember, going back to what I said, like in one of my first comments, and that is, this is all about tax bill transparency. We are not telling anyone where their kids should go to school. We're just telling taxpayers that they have a right to know where their tax dollars are going. And so then you want to look at, you know your timeline. For example, tax bills have to be done in November. So you've got to work backwards from there and figure out how much time is this going to take you, how's it going to come out, and how's it all going to be done. And so those are kind of the real important getting started. And then you want to do what we call power analysis. You know, who are going to be some spokespeople for you? Who are going to help you get this done? Who are going to be people that they say this is a good idea, it's going to happen. And those are the people that you want to have on board. And then you also want to know, why are some people objecting to this? In Green Bay, in Brown County, we have a thing called the Brown County Taxpayers Alliance. It's a bunch of men that are very in tune to taxes and want to understand where their taxes are going. And we knew that they were an important group for us to talk to. And what was most interesting was we went and talked to them, took the chief financial officer for the Green Bay Public Schools, who they adore because she talks numbers with them. And they did not even understand that they were paying for private school vouchers. So for them, it was like this huge eye-opening experience to say, what do you mean we're paying for transportation costs between public schools and private schools? What do you mean we're paying for? And they just went through this whole list, and they were like, okay. And they became our advocates. They were willing to talk to legislators, they were willing to talk to some city council members, they
They were willing to really get involved. And they were, usually when I have to go talk to them, when we're trying to get people to say vote yes for a referenda, they're my toughest audience to get to say yes, where are these tax dollars going? But they really got on board because they now knew this is what they had to know and what they had to share with other people. Who are your detractors? Who doesn't want to see this happen? And then find out why they don't want to make it happen. And sometimes when you get to that why, you get them to say, we can do this. This makes sense to do this. Because you're not saying something can't be ours. You're saying, we're just clarifying this and creating information. And what's your timeline? And who needs to do what? And who is taking the lead? If you can have one person in the lead, but have some committee people that do a bunch of different pieces of it, it moves really fast. And you know that toolkit that I said, we go through it step by step by step, telling you how to get it done. And I think Port Edwards already has a resolution. Wisconsin Rapids already has a resolution. So you're on to the next step already in at least those two communities. You're ready to go to your city council and start identifying who you need on board to bring it forward and how they want to do it. And you also have a lot of communities in the area. Menominee School District just went to the city council, and the school board member from Menominee, we had him on video and audio of his presentation at the city council meeting, and it's going to be on our toolkit very quickly, and that gives you verbiage that you might want to say and listen to, and you can also pick up the phone and call any of these people, and they will help you. Your plan. Get your team together, you build a team, you have the company I work for as a resource to come help you do that. You share the leadership. You get a really consistent plan of how you're going to communicate things. We have a whole connection to Lori and how they did it and the step-by-step and the things they created and all of that, which is very helpful. Make it a very clear and doable plan. It doesn't have to be a nightmare, and it doesn't have to be a lot of work. It's a process, and I'm not going to deny that, but it's very doable, and it can be done. And advocates and communities are really valuable. And then use our toolkit, communicate with people. That's really, really, really important. And build community partners. Identify some people in the community. We have key businesses in the community that were willing to pick up the phone and call a city council person and say yes in some of them. And in other communities, like in Ashland, the superintendent said, and the school board said, we're doing this, and they just did it all themselves, and we didn't have to engage with build a big community support. They talked to the mayor, and she was like on board with it. Same in Washburn. In fact, the mayor in Washburn led the charge to get this done because they felt that strongly about it because they were partners in that community. Next one. You already saw this, but some communities are choosing to do an insert. We don't think that's the best way to do it, but it's a way that it can be done because people open their tax bill and sometimes they pull out all the inserts first and don't really look at them, but they do look at their tax bills. So if we can get this right on the tax bill, that's a pretty powerful place to have it. Next one, Lauren. Go ahead. You're fine.
It just said you are paying this percentage of your taxes going to public schools.
Right. This will be in the notes section on the tax bill. It won't be right in the line where it says Wisconsin Rapids School District.
much wealthier property tax base than like a city, than a school district of Green Bay.
And I think your beautiful lakes here would probably impact what kind of state aid you get. This is a beautiful community, which I've never been to, so, you know, that plays a factor in what your property taxes are and what the aid is that comes to the school district. Does that make sense? And now over to you. Sorry, I'm pointing, I didn't mean to point.
My question doesn't have to do with numbers, it's kind of an outlier kind of question. So is the thought that combining the districts will take away their headache, causing longer busing, and that will help bring this gap together? Well, just, maybe I'm not explaining it correctly.
I know exactly, you're talking about the consolidation effort that was presented by some legislators in this last legislative cycle. That really has nothing to do with why we're doing the tax bill transparency project, but it's an idea, and you just have to think, we have a philosophy at Wisconsin Public Education Network that our public schools are the hearts of our community, and that, you know, having strong, thriving, successful public schools makes a huge difference in the economic quality of the community. So, but do we know that we have to, in some situations, you know, when you haven't had a cost of living increase for over 17 years, your school districts have probably deferred some maintenance. You know, there's buildings in the Green Bay School District that were built in 1939.
Our average school age, so even now we have two newer schools, our average school age is 67.
Yeah, the average school age in Green Bay is 67 years. And, you know, if you have to put these roofs on it, and you have to pave parking lots, and you have to have bathrooms that work, and you have to have, you know, kitchens for food service to be delivered, and some of those things need maintenance. And I know a lot of, I have one example that I share, and that is that I know a school district I worked with helping pass a referendum who was going out, their maintenance person was going out on Etsy to get parts for their boiler because the boiler wasn't made anymore, and the guy had to go to a junkyard to get the parts for the boiler. Now, if that happened to me at my house, I know my house is a lot smaller than the school district, but, you know, that's kind of sometimes how you have to put it so that you can think about this on a much larger scale, is that we have to be prepared for that. Yeah.
Just as a point of information, can you address the question that will change all this once the caps come off in 26, 27?
Yeah. He's bringing up the fact that at the end of 26, like right now, the caps come off of the number of people the number of children who can get vouchers. For the last a lot of number of years, they put in place, it could be a 1% increase per year up to 10%. And now, because that means that 10% of the kids statewide can get a voucher to go to whatever private school they want to go to. In the end of 2026, the caps come off, which means that, and we only have 3 school districts in the whole state of Wisconsin that have hit the caps. So you saw from Lori's slide how Green Bay has still been well below that cap, but the cost of the vouchers have gone up at a pretty significant amount. So we don't know for sure. That's why we asked for a moratorium on the caps and have them stay in place. And we really hope that it was going to be addressed in the bill that the governor and Representative Voss and Senator Lemahue
the school districts in here, but it hurt us because we just passed a referendum in 2024. And part of our message was, hey, our mill rate actually is going down. We're not going to be increasing your taxes through this, right? We can't say your taxes aren't going to go up because we all know that the current inflation to home prices, right, is really driving people's property taxes. I'm going to share a little unknown fact with you because I get a lot of people surprised when they hear it. So when you think about how things are taxed on your property bill, your city or municipality, the county, if you have a technical college, those are all linked to your assessed value. So think about how often your assessed value changes, not very often, right? So that's why you see like a 3% increase, a 2% increase. Because it's really basic to what they're doing with their budget. Public schools are linked to your equalized value, your fair market value, your fair market value. So when I first started at Green Bay Schools in the early 2012 or 2014 era, property values were going up about 2 to 3% a year, right? So it wasn't a huge increase. They're going up 14%, 20% some of our municipalities a year. So it doesn't matter what we do. We can do nothing that impacts taxes. Those property taxes payers are still seeing substantial increases, and they're seeing it linked to our levy because of the fact that those house inflation is so high. What they don't understand is that they say, oh wow, like our taxes went up so much. But what they don't understand is we still can only spend $11,650 per kid, right? So we're still only paying this much. And so this last budget cycle, so for this school year and next school year, we were given the $325 per pupil, but no equalized aid to offset that, which is the first time ever. So what that means is that if districts want to be able to take advantage of that $325 per pupil, they had to levy the taxpayers for it. And so that means school districts, so there's this big accusation, school districts really raised taxes this last year, only because the state did not fund the $325 per pupil, which it almost always did. And so, when the school districts are making decisions between laying off the teacher, raising class sizes, they're going to levy the $325. They're in tough straits. So I just wanted to say that. I want to put that out there because I just feel like we've just gotten a really bad rap this year for that. And I think it's important to understand since we've been talking so much about taxing. So
Another piece to that that's so important, I live in one of those municipalities that went up 20%. And what is happening is because our cities, our municipalities, and our counties aren't getting the money from the state that they need to run, they're going to the property taxpayers and saying, we're increasing our we're reassessing the value of your home because we need more revenue. So that's happening as well. So it's like this double whammy of, oh wow, here's a school district trying to go to referendum, and at the same time, the city or the county or the municipality has reassessed, and property tax owners are already seeing increased costs. But the big clarification, going back to you, sir, is what Lori said is your school district can still only spend that $11,650 per child. So, like midway through the year, sometimes what happens is the state of Wisconsin will say, hey, we're giving these tax credits, and you're going to get a tax credit because the school district went over the $11,650 because of the tax collections, and so tax dollars are coming back to you. But it's in this obscure moment in time that you get this notification, and there's no connection to it being kind of a money coming from what should have gone to public schools. And that big $2.5 billion surplus that everybody has been talking about. The reason that surplus is what it is because public schools haven't gotten the money
organized aid, and that money then went into that surplus. So a good portion of that surplus should be and should have gone to public schools. So, other questions? Yes? I didn't answer your question very well, did I? But I don't have the really,
No, that's okay. I used to, well, this has something to do with my question now, but I did work for the two-year campuses with UW, and I did see how the books were falling in the library because of a heavy rain. I did work with a woman who had a plastic bag over her head that would then drain the water when it would rain to go to a garbage can, so she doesn't sit there wet all day. So I do see, and I did see that happen to that. So my question is, again, kind of off-ball, is that, are the schools supposed to be going out and selling drafting paper to make up? I mean, when you're going to get to the point that we're gonna give all this money away, so, okay, so the principal's supposed to be standing outside, hawking books or hawking anything else that's out there, cars or whatever, so, no pun intended. But how is this supposed to then, how are you supposed to figure out that?
well, this is what we're saying is to every legislator that will listen is it's time to redo how we fund our public schools. It has to be done legislatively, and we can't wait any longer. Because I say this in every presentation, our public schools are not failing. I want everybody to hear me. Our public schools are not failing. Kids are doing amazing things in our public schools all over the state, but they are starving. You know, it's like, how long do you keep your hand on the throat and don't feed your schools? You know, and that's where we are. You know, it's like, I never in my wildest memory or thoughts would think that the state of Wisconsin would decide not to fund their public schools. And they made that choice. And they really have done it for two budgets. Because in 23, 25, they said your ESSER funds and your ARPA funds are all the money that you really need to get, and you're getting this federal money for COVID relief, and so we're not putting any money into our public schools. So that really happened over two budgets. And you just, you know, our public education community deserves to get raises. They do great jobs. They're doing more with less. The other thing that hasn't been said that's important is public schools have a number of unfunded mandates. Things that you have to do, services that you have to provide, and there's no funding behind those. In 2025, they put a new reading program into this, and it was put in through the legislature. It was called Act 20. And it was supposed to come with a $50 million budget so that schools would get that money. Now, because it was put into legislation, it has to be done. And whether they got the money or not, which they didn't, because there were legislators that were mad at the governor because he put in the 400 years of 325, and so they weren't going to release the $50 million. So the $50 million didn't get released, but yet Port Edwards, Wisconsin Rapids, Marshfield, all the other schools around here had to put that reading program in place. They had to meet the number of reading supervisors and trainers and all of those things to make this happen. So that's another piece that nobody ever hears about, is that those mandates are required and have to be, taken care of. So I'm going to, a question? Go ahead.
So they're required for the public schools, but they're not required by the private schools.
Our question is, it's required by the public schools, but not by the private schools. That's right. And that's the other thing we say. If you're going to get state money, you need to follow the same rules. If you're going to get taxpayer funded, which
remember, we have a constitutional requirement to do, then you need to meet the same mandates. And that's not happening. And that's why we're talking about this. And so, I'm gonna finish up real quickly and say, messaging matters. We have a fabulous messaging person right here with me tonight. And she helps me almost every day. And it does matter. It matters to say the facts over and over. If you don't know the answer, don't try to fake it. That's one of those situations where it's not a good idea to do that. And keep telling people, don't use the term choice, because that means something totally different. Wisconsin has universal school choice in their state, meaning your child can go to any school that you want to send your child to. What we're saying is privatization should not get taxpayer dollars before we fund our public schools, and that it's really important to tell taxpayers where their dollars are going. Okay? So that's a really important thing. But more importantly, as much as it is about the money, it's not about the money. It's about what we're giving kids every single day. And if you're buying parts for your boiler on Etsy, because that boiler is not made anymore, and you're not heating your building equally, you're putting kids at risk. If you can't buy the materials because you don't have the funds in your budget, then your kids aren't going to be able to compete at the same level as kids in some other communities. So we want people to know where their tax dollars are going, because I can guess that every single one of you want every child in your given communities to be successful. And that's being put at risk. And it's not fair, and it's not right, and it's also your tax dollars. And so I hope you all take this project on in your communities. I hope you call my office for assistance. I'm glad to help. I have handout materials out in the lobby. If there's no more questions, we can be done, because I know it's a big weekend for here. So thank you for your time and for being here and for being part of such a great school district.
Thank you so much, Denise and Lori, and thank you everyone for coming out on this beautiful evening. I know you have a long drive back. Will you stick around for a few minutes if we have any questions? Okay, they'll stick around for a few more minutes. Thank you again for coming out this evening. Please pick up handouts in the lobby, and thanks for supporting our public schools. They are the heartbeat of our community. Thank you.
South.